Bootstrap Confidential, the podcast where we talk to successful bootstrappers about the playbook for bootstrapping.
Welcome to Bootstrap Confidential, where this episode I'm delighted to welcome Helen Tanner to the show. Helen is the founder of Data Cubed, which she started in Bristol, UK, and is now just launching the office in Sydney, Australia, where she is at the moment. So excited to talk about that in a minute. But firstly, welcome to the show and thank you for joining us, Helen.
Thanks, Charles. Thank you for having me.
Not at all. I always like to start with understanding the journey that led you to take the leap and become a founder. So you've got quite an unusual background because you started as a marine forecaster with a math and forecasting, weather forecasting experience. Then you kind of moved into marketing and then into data, and then you founded and launched a data and AI business. So tell me just a bit about how that transition and journey kind of like rolled out.
Yeah, really, really convoluted career path, isn't it? I'm not quite sure how it worked out, but yeah, really odd. You know, I started my first job. I studied oceanography because I love the sea, and my first job was working at the Met Office in a data analytics role. And, so I did start in data and now I'm in data. But otherwise, I've taken a very convoluted path. But I was working at the Met Office analysing data from weather buoys. Part of my job was going offshore and working on a network of moored oceanographic buoys off the continental shelf of Ireland. So way off the UK, with a kind of network of weather buoys that are meant to kind of give the Met Office a view of incoming storms into the UK. And part of my job was to go offshore on these big mooring vessels with a Glaswegian crew and be kind of put onto a rib and then onto these kind of pretty big but tiny in the ocean buoys and change over the weather sensors and the wind vanes and the anemometers and the temperature gauges and things like that. So crazy first job. I was kind of working offshore for about 50 days a year. And then the other part of my job was analysing data. So I did kind of start in that kind of analysing data space, but then I then took some time out and went travelling, Australia, New Zealand, Asia, all over the place. I then came back and I came back from my travelling experience with no money, and the Met Office said to me, we've got this kind of role. Do you want to work in marketing? And I'd been back in the country with no money in my pockets. And I was like, I don't know anything about marketing. And they're like, you'll be fine. How can it be? So total career drift into marketing at the Met Office and selling weather services to retailers and insurers. Then into AXA Financial Services in marketing. I never really felt like a conventional marketer though. Then into computer share in marketing, but always was a strange marketer because of my data background. So then started coming up with ideas of ways to monetize data and thought, why am I doing these for these big global corporations who, already making a load of money? My dad runs small businesses, and I thought, I wonder if I can help small businesses to monetize their data. And that's what I set up Data Cube with that premise 8 years ago. I'm going to set up Data Cube and I'm going to help small businesses to monetize their data. It took me about 12 months to realize that I was trying to sell this concept to small businesses and they didn't even have basic reporting in place, yet alone be in a position to monetize their data. I was going, I'm going to help you monetize their data. And they're going, firstly, what data? And then secondly, it's such a muddle house. Before you do that, can you help me in other ways? So I, within kind of first year, ended up realizing that I'd inadvertently set up a data consultancy to solve things like automated reporting and those types of things. So yeah, very convoluted career path. It's funny how things work out, isn't it?
That's so interesting, though, because almost every founder I talk to sets up. I think I've only spoken to one who had a very, very fixed idea of exactly what they were going to do. And that's actually what they did. Most people have like a good idea, sometimes a fixed idea of what they're going to do. And then they sort of start poking around in corners and realize that I was going to do this, but actually, this is where there's an opportunity or where there's a need in the market, or whatever it might be. So you started Data Cubed. You obviously like had an idea. You pivoted pretty quickly. I mean, when you were first starting, were you just basically taking any consultancy job you could to try and get things up and running? Were you did you have a kind of runway that you'd built yourself? So that, I've got 12 months to make this work, and then I'm going to run out of money, or what was the kind of process you went through that?
Yeah, I had I'd been working in the corporate world, so I had kind of savings and things from that. So I had a nice, easy run of, I could have lasted a year. I didn't need to. I think it took me a few months before I got my first gig. I think, though, in year one, in retrospect, I was selling myself as a consultant, and therefore people were buying me and they happened to invoice Data Cubed. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They were working with Howells as kind of an employee, just invoicing them through Data Cubed. So the first year, in retrospect, that's what I was doing. I was a contractor working for a business. The first projects, they were all involved data to some degree. So they were all related to data, so that none of them were kind of crazy off. But yeah, I think in that first year I was selling myself as a contractor. And then in year two, when I went, okay, I've got some cash in the bank, I'll now recruit some people. It was really a big jump from selling me as a consultant contractor to selling a team of people was the hardest thing. That was really, because then I was operating like a proper business, selling a team and selling a capability. And that took at least a year, I think, to properly get traction. I was still being recruited as a bit of a contractor and trying to get other people working for me. So that was a big jump, and that was hard.
I'll come back to that in a second about how you actually sold it once you've made that paradigm shift. But like a lot of founders, you start selling yourself and people buy you. And that means effectively the culture of the business is you, because you're a one-person band. As you start to bring people in and build out that team, did you consciously go, before you started working out, or as you were working out how to kind of sell the broader value proposition, did you consciously go, okay, I want everyone to behave like me? Or did you consciously go, this is the culture of how people want to behave? Or did you just run at 100 miles an hour and then the culture kind of evolved organically? What was the kind of process you went through that?
I think because I set up my business and I was kind of, how old was I? 42. I'd been in the corporate world for quite a long time, and therefore it wasn't my first. It was my first business that I'd set up, but it wasn't my first team that I'd set up. So I think I'd learned a lot about that along the way. I remember, and I won't name names, but I've in my career I've worked in environments and in teams that were quite bitchy and nasty, and I went into one of my roles and I inherited a team of about 20, 30 people. And, somebody kind of asked me, you're always smiling, you're always happy, Hells, but what really kind of winds you up? And I was like, I don't tolerate bitchiness or nastiness or anything like that. And I remember, it wasn't strategic, but actually it had a big impact on that team, because then they knew what my boundary was, that I wasn't going to tolerate bitchiness and nastiness. And I think I've never stated something as loud as that within my business, Data Cubed. But I think people do, they set your tone. So I would say I more have led by example, and I've been loud about the things that are important to me, and loud when times are tough and how I handle those things, if you know what I mean. I feel absolutely passionately about there's no being negative or nasty about any of our clients, for instance.
Yeah.
that they pay our salaries, they pay your salaries to the team, so I won't tolerate anyone even jokingly being negative about our clients. Same with being negative about people. So I got mostly led by example, but I think probably emphasized by loud declarations of belief. I think, culture is what you tolerate. And, I don't tolerate that, in the things that are in my view, absolutely crucial for a good culture. There was a point where I wrote down, I read a book, I'm quite a prolific business book reader, and I wrote down my beliefs and my principles, and I shared that. But people just, I think I did this kind of maybe at the 4 or 5 year point, and people's reaction was, yeah, we already knew that, Hels, right? You didn't need to tell us that. It's pretty obvious. So I think it's leading by example, and then loud declarations of things that are important to me, and particularly in bad times.
A positive working environment is so important when you're in that startup world because you've got such different stresses and levels of exhaustion and volatility that you don't have in the corporate world, which kind of leads me on to my next question. So as you said, you had lots of experience in building corporate teams and sometimes in inheriting corporate teams and having to deal with the mess and fix it. But when you started building out your team, like when you're in the corporate world, you've got a big brand behind you. You can deliberately target people and say, look, come and join this band. It'll be great for your career. And you can generally offer quite a decent salary and package. And it's nothing particularly unusual. It's like a natural step for them to go from A to B. When you're in the startup world, you're basically generally asking people to take a huge gamble with their career, to work for possibly less money, but maybe the same amount, but certainly much more stress, much more volatility. I mean, obviously, as a founder, there's the fun, which you just don't normally get. And we're both huge proponents of that. But what sort of things did you look for to try and make sure? Because, every founder I speak to, myself included, has made those mistakes. If they were great in the corporate world, but in the startup world, they just can't operate without that support system. And when you've done that as a founder and you've invested the money and the time, it's chewing through a lot of cash before you realize that and then have to ease them out. So how did you try and work to identify making sure that the people you brought into the team would thrive in the startup world and not should be kind of left a little bit at sea?
I think I haven't done a good job on that. I think I'm better now. I think I made a shit ton of mistakes at the beginning, and don't get me wrong, everyone who has worked with me, they're all brilliant people, but for exactly what you've said, Charles, they weren't good fits into a startup environment. So brilliant people, but just they like to have everything around them and the processes and those types of things. I've had someone to talk about it as being like, first mile people and second mile people and third mile people. And, first mile people, there are no processes, there are no templates, there are no checklists, there's nothing. And some people love that and most people hate that, right? So someone like me, I love that. I'm definitely a first mile person. I'd much rather create a process rather than inherit someone else's. So I made loads of mistakes with recruiting really talented, amazing people, but they weren't first mile people. I then got better at that, and in my interview process started to become, we're a small business, and they would go, oh, that's cool. I'm really excited. I'd love to work in a small business. And then in my interview process, I would put them off. I would go, I think you're going to hate it. We haven't got this, we haven't got that. I think loads of people hate it. I'm not sure this is going to be for you, right? Try and put them off. And in the spirit of, if I can't put them off, maybe they are the right person. So I got better at trying to, ensure they didn't romanticize what a startup was. And then I got better at asking the right kind of questions of what motivates them and demotivates them, what brings out the best in them, the worst in them. But it is hard. There's nobody in the business now who worked with me in the first few years. And and I think partly that's because I recruited the wrong people at that time, as I say, albeit super talented people. But also I think the people who loved that bit at the beginning that wouldn't like it now, right? Because we're 8, 9 years old, and we've got processes and we've got templates and we've got
Processes and systems and orthodoxy, and there's not all that chaos. It's so true. And if it's any consolation, I've never interviewed a single founder who said I got it right from the get-go. Everyone says, "Oh my God, I made so many mistakes trying to work out who to employ and what sort of person to employ and what to look for, and all these different processes they had in interviews to try and pin down, is this person good?" And as you say, they're all super talented, but some people just thrive and others don't. I used to call it beachhead talent. Like, you've got the people who arrive on the beach, you've got like there's nothing there, no systems, no processes, no brands, and then you kind of move to the nation builders who arrive with like a small team, and there's a beachhead established, probably watching too many war movies as a child or something for the military analogies. But just talking about like the toxicity and making sure there's no toxicity with when clients are negative or staff internally are negative. Like when you're building a business and you're in startup mode, you face an amount of rejection that is insane compared to normal life. And I don't think I've ever spoken to someone who goes, yeah, I was expecting that level of rejection. Like even people with, I had a background in cold calling sales where you basically get rejected 95% of the time. So I thought I was ready, and I absolutely wasn't. But so how did you find that? And what are some of the things that you did to cope? And not so much to get a work-life balance, because I just don't think that's possible in the first few years, but more to make sure you didn't, A, you could cope with the rejection, and B, you just didn't lose touch completely with the world that wasn't data cubed, which is what founders often say. It's not like I'm trying to get a work-life balance. I just want to make sure I still remember I've got friends and family, and occasionally more than once a year I see them or something, because they're getting a bit concerned. So what were some of the things that you did to try and cope with that, and also kind of try and find a solution?
I think it's really interesting. I think it's been brutal. Absolutely brutally hard running this business up until even a year ago. So what's that? Up until like 7-year point. So not just the first few years, but like and even now it's brutally hard. It's just I think I don't think it gets easier. I think you just get stronger and more resilient, or So yeah, it's been brutally hard. It's the stress levels I experience are kind of like I've never experienced before. I'm glad I did it in my 40s rather than in my 20s. I think my 20 years in the corporate world trained me. I had really good training, so I haven't had to having dealt with every type of staff management issue. For instance, people management doesn't faze me. As harsh as it is, performance managing people up or out, making redundancies, none of that phases me because I've been through that before. So I think I'm glad I did it in my 40s when I had really good grounding. I'm someone who luckily doesn't suffer from mental health issues, but it's been such a mental challenge. I'm someone who loves a challenge. And, I got bored in the corporate world within 6 months to 12 months of doing every job. I've never got bored in Data Cubed because it's just so much of an uphill challenge all the time. I think the way I kind of describe it is I think like being a founder it's a calling. I think if you've got an option to be a founder or to be an employee, be an employee. My God, like it's crazy to be a founder. And because the odds of success are so low, like most founders, I've been in all the accelerators, the Set Squared, the NatWest, the 10,000 Small Businesses, Morgan Stanley. I've been in all of them. And so many of the founders that I started with are no longer in business now. Yeah. So many of them, most of them. There's a fraction of us still in business after eight years of business. So the odds of success are so tiny. So I think there's a couple of things. One, I think you have to have this naive optimism that no matter what happens, you'll find a way through. You know, you have to have, and I deliberately use the word naive. I think naivety is a really helpful thing for founders to channel. You know, I don't know how I handle it, but I will. You know,
Yeah.
I'm stubborn enough, I'm tenacious enough, I'm relentless enough, I'm optimistic enough, and I'm naive enough to know that somehow I will get through it. And I do not know how. And I really think that's really important. I think kind of balancing that with a kind of acceptance of well, not just about acceptance of failure, but actually I've gone through a big journey from hating failure to accepting it as a tolerable evil, to now at the kind of eight year point, failure is a necessary part of the journey.
Yeah.
You know, like you know, I see it differently now. You know, I'm you know, the success of Data Cubed is, you know, the tiny success of the mountains of failures, and I don't think there's any way you can avoid failures to become successful, whatever successful is. So so that mindset of not seeing a failure as a bad thing, not then moving to seeing it as a necessary evil, to actually go for failure is the stepping stone to success. So there's a number of different things in there, but you know, it's been a psychological challenge that I never would have expected. And lots of my friends kind of say to me, you know, I've set up a business, and then having watched you do it, Hells, there ain't no way I'm setting up a business.
Yeah, I had similar comments as well. You do need a relentless, a never-ending reservoir of kind of blind optimism, and you do need that mentality, as you say, of when it goes wrong, which is pretty much most days. I think in like the almost 20 years I was running my last business, something went wrong every day, from small to like, you know, existential. We're going to go under. But when it goes wrong, I think it's so important that you think, okay, it's not a question of, are we going to get through this? I can't even begin to dwell on that. We are going to get through it. I've got no idea how, but if we just work at it, we will find a way through. And it's amazing, once you've done that a few times, you get more confident when the problems get more and more confronting, that, okay, this is a way forward. But as I said at the start, you're in Australia, you're in Sydney, your head office and your main team is obviously in Bristol in the UK. So you're at that exciting bit now, where effectively you're doing another, you know, mile one experience in Sydney, using everything you learned in Bristol. So how, like, when small businesses expand, and I did exactly the same thing going the other way. I was in Sydney and then I opened up in London. But you kind of move from, okay, we're up here, we're established, we've got a team of like 10, 15, 20 people. And then you go and do it again, where you're just the first person on the ground. No one's really heard of your brands. But what are some of the things that you're thinking about to make sure you build a team and a culture that has perhaps not exactly the same processes in Sydney as in Bristol, but similar process? So how are you thinking through that kind of like international expansion?
I mean, firstly, you know, to my kind of, you know, success is built on a shit ton of failure. I've already tried and failed in New Zealand, and tried and failed in Poland. So obviously, yay me! I failed twice, so therefore third time lucky. And you know, generally, through those failures, you learn what not to do. So this time, having learnt and failed and learnt a shit ton of stuff twice, I'm this time starting with, you know, firstly a market that I've done a recce here with, and I've, you know, qualified that culturally they are Australian businesses want to work with UK firms, and that's seen as a positive thing. Secondly, start with salespeople on the ground. Don't start with tech people on the ground. So I've got a go-to-market partner here. So sell it first before you build it. It's another kind of lesson that I've learned, and therefore sales first. Be on the ground myself, and set it up as, we are lifting and dropping and selling data cube services. I've trialed different kind of franchisee models before, and they just didn't work. So learning from my 2 failures, learning from DataCube UK as a success to date, and therefore implementing the things that have worked before in a market I've done a recce on, working with really good partners and people on the ground who I trust, and probably having spent a year planning it. Actually, that's probably the other thing I've done this time. So, I did a recce here. I've built relationships slowly. I've been introduced to lots of different people. I've done my research. I've done my time, and therefore, we officially launched today, but it's been the product of a year of mainly relationship building. Building relationships with people take a while. So yeah, loads, applying all my lessons learned. So fingers crossed, we've got a better chance of success this time.
Well, congratulations on launching officially today. But just coming back to all the lessons learned, you mentioned earlier you read business books, and I voraciously read anything I could get my hands on to try and give me an idea of how to get through stuff. And obviously, you learn a lot. You're self-taught a lot. On the areas where you don't know stuff, you've got a strong background in data, you've got a strong background in marketing. Areas where you didn't know stuff, maybe with how to build products, or with the finances, or with international expansion. With the lessons you learned in Poland and New Zealand. Do you use mentors? Do you just basically self-teach? Do you go, let's just try it and learn on the way? Is it a combination of all three? How are some of the ways that you've kind of dealt with those blind spots that you've got and overcome them? Because most founders don't have a large amount of money to splash out, and therefore, there are limited options to where you can get advice from.
Yeah, I think I mentioned earlier that I'd been part of accelerators like NatWest Accelerator, Set Squared. They were brilliant when we were young as a business. Free resource, free kind of access to information. Brilliant. Highly recommend that. The other thing was finding people, sounds like you, Charles, right? People who are ahead of me on the journey and are humble enough and honest and authentic enough to share all of the things they got wrong. And I've been really lucky to have had different people like that come into my life, and them straight away because I have a coffee with them and they don't bullshit you, and they openly talk about all the mistakes they've made. I've learned so much from those people along the way. My dad is an accountant by trade. He's never done my accounts, but we've got accountants and we've got a financial controller, but I don't know what people do without having an accountant as a dad, because he has caught stuff the accountants have missed. And, he's ensured that everything we've done is legit. I don't know what I'd do without him. So I've had a free CFO from day one.
That's so interesting. My dad told me the day just before I started, he said, if I can give you one piece of advice every single morning, go in, open up your ledger, obviously pre-computer days, open up your ledger and look at what your cash position is today and what it's going to be tomorrow and what it's going to be next week before you do anything else every day. And that's obviously you do it electronically now, but great parental advice for any founder. But sorry, interrupting you there.
100%. And no wonder people go into business because because it's really easy to get confused with it all. And then probably the last thing, I have got like a tech founder group of people who I've known for 4 years, and we came together as a part of a group called ICE. We were introduced together and we were grouped into it's about kind of 6 to 8 of us in a kind of founders group. And it's like group therapy for tech founders. And and we meet really regularly, and they have kept me sane. Like, there was a point about 4 years ago, I was really close to burnout, having kind of palpitations. I didn't recognize it as burnout because I just didn't think I'd get burnout. And through this group session, they called me on it and helped me before I sunk further, because they'd all been through similar things.
Yeah.
So they are like, it's like group therapy with tech founders, because if you're not, people who are not founders don't get it. Like, I've got brilliant friends, and they're brilliantly supportive, but only do founders properly get the stresses, and therefore having that support group has kept me sane over the last 4 years. So having people who you can talk honestly, selfishly, authentically, about, and who don't just spin you a line, go, it's going to be okay, Hels, but they've been through it themselves, so they can tell you their lived experience. Therefore, it's really empathetic and really supportive. So that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, it is true. Only other founders do get it, and as you said earlier, I think when I opened up when I moved back to the UK, so years after I opened our UK office, by which stage the business was quite a big global business. I mean, going 15 years, but still, you've got all the challenges, and very, very close friends who'd been in the UK when I'd been in Australia and hadn't seen me for ages were looking at me going, "Are you sure you're enjoying this? Because it just does not look fun. It looks awful." And it's very hard to explain what you're going through and why it's actually a positive thing, because that seems even crazier when you're trying to explain that to non-founders. That I'm in this kind of hell and it's brilliant and I'm thoroughly enjoying it. I'm just drowning a little bit at the moment. But just want to talk a bit about the fact that which I always like to ask female founders about. Do you think there were any? I mean, obviously, there's practically, I think 98% of VC money goes to male founders, especially in the UK. You didn't go after VC money, but despite that, were there any other challenges that you found or things that you thought were different because you were a female founder? And to any other female founders listening, any advice you have that to other female founders about how to overcome some of those challenges?
It's a really hard one. I don't think of myself as a female founder very often at all. I just think of myself as a founder. Being like I mentioned, my founder group therapy group, they're all guys apart from me. At a lot of events I go to, it's pretty male dominated, particularly kind of tech founders. However, even though it's not that diverse, it's really inclusive. So, there might not be that many women, but the men there are, supporters, female supporters, feminists. They're brilliant. I've never felt excluded in terms of founder communities. I think, investors. I went down that route mainly because I set up my own business because I've got an unhealthy disregard for authority and I don't want a boss. And I therefore associated having an investor as having a boss. And I'm like, no freaking way. I set up this business to be the boss. I don't want a pseudo boss. So I didn't go down that route. But it is male dominated, and there are massive issues there. I think, in Bristol, and mainly run the business from Bristol in the UK, there's such a brilliant group of female founders in Bristol that are so talented, such talented women, that I didn't feel alone. And I think women support women. So yeah, I think, as I say, even in the male environments, I felt really supported by the founders. And there are loads of brilliant female founders, so recommend people hunt them out. I can't really talk to that investor space, but there are massive problems there, like you say. I don't have stories to tell about that space other than secondhand ones, but there are massive problems there.
Yeah.
And but finding finding your people and women helping women, I think is the answer.
Okay, it's interesting what you say about hating authority, because I think every single founder I've ever spoken to, myself included, when they're asked why did you do it, will come up with all sorts of reasons about, there was a gap in the market, it was just the right time, I thought there was an opportunity here. And then after they've been through all the kind of business reasons, they'll eventually go, fundamentally, I just absolutely hate being told what to do. And therefore the only solution was to be the boss. Literally the last podcast I did 2 weeks ago was almost verbatim the same as you. Like, I hate authority. I had to be my own boss. I have massive issues with authority and orthodoxy, which is why I had to start a business. There's no other way forward. Just
Exactly that. And as I say, I think it's visceral for me. But I think you need that to set up your own business. You need that anger or that kind of real raw emotional drive, because no sane person would set up their own business. The odds are too stacked against you. So you need to have that irrational, uncontrollable emotion driving you. So yeah, I think that's why we all do it.
If you could go back 8 years, like travel in time and sit down with yourself 8 years ago and say, know this one thing before you start, what would be the one thing you would tell yourself 8 years ago that you didn't know at that time, that you think now, God, if I'd just known that at the start? I mean, obviously that skips the whole learning through experience, learning through failure. But if you could just give yourself one piece of advice, what would you say to yourself 8 years ago to help you get started that you didn't know at the time?
I think it would be that failures are the stepping stones to success. And, there's I can't remember which tennis player was talking about it, but, one of the tennis players was saying that, if you win 51% of the serves, then, you win the match type thing. And so therefore, if get comfortable, see failure as a positive thing that is going to get you there faster. And failure is the stepping stone, and aim to win 51% of the time. That mindset, of rather than spending the first probably 6-7 years of this business, probably, even now it's a work in progress for me. So rather than wasting so much energy and effort and emotion on the sadness and frustration and pain of failures, if I'd been able to move through them quicker, I would have been further forward. So that's what I would tell myself. Yeah.
That's a fantastic piece of advice. Helen, we're out of time. Thank you so much for your time. I can carry on asking you questions forever, but thank you very much for joining us and for sharing very openly and honestly your story. And congratulations for opening up in Sydney, Australia, and all the best with the business there as well as in Bristol.
Thank you, Charles. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
For all our listeners, if you'd like to hear more podcasts on how to bootstrap, or if you want to access all our bootstrapping resources and playbooks, then just go to our website, www.bootstrapconfidential.com, for free registration.